you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Dead Boy Detective Season 1, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have Crystal coming up with her solution on how to deal with the David situation. For her, it was going to be a situation of... her solution wasn't like really a great solution. It's just like, hey, I'm in a good place now. And it was almost like she was kind of trying to convince herself, at least that's how Nico was looking at it. Like, hey, you're just trying to convince yourself more than you're trying to convince others of like, right, this is your good life now. And you're comfortable with things being as they are. So it's more like I got to find out how to like lock David out of my head type of situation. But it's like, until you like properly deal with that, like, are you really dealing with it? Or are you just kind of like, I'm misremembering exactly, but it was almost like she wasn't confronting the situation directly. It was almost like I'm going to ignore it until it goes away type of thing. But Nico was like, probably not the best thing to do, which Nico's going through her own crisis after everything that went down with Jenny and Maxine last episode, which I also didn't, I thought about it at the time, but I forgot to talk about it. Like, it's just interesting, the name Maxine, because of the whole, like, well, the next movie, I haven't seen the movies, but like the X, Pearl, and then like the next movie is Maxine. Such interesting timing and stuff like that. Tensions and all that aside, but Nico take down she puts away like all her manga and everything that's like romance related, because she's a lover of love, shipper of ships. But the problem is like she felt bad because it's like, right, my instincts, I can't trust myself after what happened with Jenny. And especially because Jenny was kind of ignoring her for a long time. And she wants to, because like Nico, I think she doesn't do well with people disliking her. I mean, because, it seemed like her and Jenny had a very like neutral relationship. It's like, right, I just pay my rent and I'm good. Because Nico kept to herself for as long as she's been living here. It's not until after the whole thing with the dandelion sprites that I think she finally is a lot more out of her shell and actually more personable around a lot of people. Because up until then, she had just kept to herself. And it's just like, and I brought these points up last episode. I mean, Nico doing what she did, there were pros and cons to it. Like, obviously, I brought up, the pro is, yes, the major con is you almost got murdered in the process, but your stalker was revealed because you thought it was like, oh, so harmless. Hey, this person is the person sending you these love letters and stuff. So like finding out that they're a stalker and they're obsessed with you and they're crazy, kind of a good thing to kind of know that out. So Kimiko, I'm saying Kimiko, Nico did the right thing in the long run, but going back to the previous point I made, con-wise, you almost got murdered by her. So yes. Jenny was kind of pissed at Nico and was flying off at her because it's like, right, I don't ask you all these questions about your personal life, why you don't have any friends, why you don't go to school. I just ask you to pay your rent, and I don't ask why you talk to yourself and why you're always pacing around talking to yourself. Like, I don't ask any of those questions because it's none of my business, just like my life isn't yours. And because Nico ends up saying the reason why she really did what she did was because it's like, because she wanted to help Jenny. It's like, right, I saw an opportunity to help someone, and I just wanted to help. But, later on, Jenny kind of, after snapping at Nico, ends up saying, like, right, I'm just sad. And it's like the first time I put myself out there, it ends up being with a completely another sociopath. So it's like, right, what happened with Maxine isn't your fault, but I'm not ready to forgive you yet. And that's the thing, like, Nico was kind of like, wait, do you hate me? Like, she does seem like the type of person that's like, I can't, like, deal with the fact is of someone hating me. Especially because it's not like Nico did anything wrong. She just tried to put two people together. Very much like I made the point last episode of who reads their bingo card, in the case of Edwin, of, oh yeah, getting ritualistically sacrificed. No one's like, oh, I got to punch that on my how I'm going to go out type of thing. Just like no one's going to piece together, hey, these two people I'm putting together, one of them might be a sociopath, a psychopathic killer. It's like, sadly, the thing is, the chances of that aren't zero, so that's kind of a bummer, but, it's not on immediate, like, red flag thing of, I got to look out for that. And considering the way the world is, it's kind of like, that might be higher on the list than you kind of would immediately think, oh, is that really a concern? It's like, there's plenty of people that were married to serial killers and had no idea, so it's kind of like, yeah, so... So at the very least for now, Nico was actually kind of thinking like, right, I should just stay in my room because all I do is cause more harm than good, which Jenny's like, okay, like there's already a nihilist living in this place, and that's me. The world doesn't need another one. So if you believe in love, if you love, go out there and help people who actually need it. Just don't help me, which is kind of like sad, but I think Nico took it with stride of like, well, at least knowing like, right, you don't hate me, and the fact is you tell me to still kind of get up out there and like help people and kind of still believe in love like I do. So we have that element to it. Then there's the whole situation, well, circling to the crystal thing, she went with Nico to try and find a solution for her David problem at Mick's store, and found an item that it's like, he even made the whole like cautionary tale of be careful what you wish for, and was like, oh yeah, it's a monkey paw type of thing, which is like, yeah. I mean, to be fair, it's like there's a lot of like cautionary tales about, obviously the monkey paw one's the like greatest example of it, but it's also just like, right, you gotta be very specific with your wishes, because if you don't word it just right, things could go kablooey. You know, it's like there's always, you gotta be careful reading the fine print when it comes to wishes type of situation. But either way, we also finally got Mick's backstory, because he was about ready to tell it, but Crystal stopped it. But Nico did the service of, hey, tell us what your whole deal is. Which, she's like, just as long as it's not a love story. He's like, no, it's not a love story. It's a tragedy. So we find out more about him as a walrus. Because that's for him, it's like, yeah, I didn't read the fine print to the whole situation. Be careful what you wish for. So it turns out the goddess of the sea, I'm blanking on her name right now, but essentially, like her and her father were lost at sea, and her father, in an attempt to try and make a sacrifice to the gods, hoping to spare his own life, he kicked his own daughter off the boat. She tried to cling on, and he took the oar or whatever, and he sliced off her fingers. I was like, Jesus, homie, that's brutal, just so she will let go of the boat. But the gods didn't smile upon the father like he hoped they would. They smiled upon the daughter and made her a goddess of the sea, and the walruses were her children. Now, I don't know if they're just a special breed of walruses, or is this indicating like all walruses are specifically like her children type of thing. But Mick, turns out he was someone that was fascinated with the human world. He saw like people on boats heading to shore, and he was fascinated, very much in a very, it's almost probably supposed to be a play on the Little Mermaid story of just like that tale. Because that goddess did not like humans, understandably, considering like, well, what happened to her? It's like, right, you know, humans can't be trusted. You know the evil they're capable of. And she told Mick not to go to the humans, but he was so desperate, you know, and because once he went to shore, he can never come back. So I don't know if, I thought it was interesting. First and foremost, I love that framing device, because I want to say I've seen Doom Patrol use that framing device where you have that little like picture thing that spins, and it tell like how that was like animated and stuff. I was like, I love that framing device for the Patch story. But what I thought was interesting is after he became human, he ended up trying to get back into water, but he almost started drowning, which I'm like, oh, like, is it almost like is it like a Devil Fruit One Piece type of thing of like, no, the sea has literally turned against you? Because like him drowning almost made it seem like, it kind of gave me that feel like the moment he's in the body of water, like the ocean's turned against him, because the goddess is literally turned against or back on you. And for him, it's like, I haven't seen home or the goddess in that 50 years. And obviously, like, he still couldn't find the red stone or whatever that the thing that Nico had given him last episode was like a green one, or maybe the episode before last, I don't remember. And she had given him a green one, and it's like, yeah, but, you know, it's supposed to be emotional stability, which I think after her situation with like everything with Jenny, it kind of made her go like, yeah, I thought this would kind of help. But it's like, once again, I think it plays into the notion of, am I really helping anyone? Either way, we had the crystal situation of, she uses the item, and it's like, yeah, you have to think about what you want. And she's like, right, I want to get Brad out of my head, I was like, that's too vague of a wish. That I was like, there's definitely going to be plot holes in that, where it's like, the moment it's like, oh, I don't want David in my head. I was like, and what ended up happening ended up being what I thought would happen. I was like, well, there's such wiggle room around the vagueness of that, her saying that. I was like, but then she also says the third line of, I just wish I was normal. And I was like, there you go. There's the catch-22 of that. Not catch-22, but I was like, there's the fine print of that one. I just knew like, oh, what's the simplest solution to make it so that you don't hear David's voice anymore? Just take away your powers. Which I thought meant she wasn't going to be able to see... I thought she wasn't going to be able to see Charles or Edwin are ghosts anymore. So I don't know, because we know in Nico's case, because she almost died, like she's able to see ghosts. So I'm like, it's interesting to know that didn't disappear from Crystal's abilities. Like when her powers went away, you would have thought that would have went away too. But maybe that's kind of like the long run of like, maybe that's supposed to imply, no, her powers were always there. They can't be taken away or destroyed. It's always like somewhere there because it's always going to be a part of her no matter what curse or whatever tries to take them away. So either that was an implication of that, her still being able to see ghosts, or maybe it's implying like, right, she's been through something that even before her power is activated, like being able to see ghosts is just innate in her, because maybe like a Nico thing, she almost died. I don't think they ever brought that up, because they always assume, I always been under the assumption because she's a medium, she was able to see ghosts. So we never really got any clarification on why she was still able to see ghosts. But I thought that was going to be going too. But the moment she saw Charles and Edwin, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess everything's kosher. You just can't interact and use your powers like you have been. I thought it was interesting when she was making a choice not to tell them. No, even Nico's like, right, you want to lie to them? It's like, it's not lying, it's just not telling them the truth right now. Her reasoning kind of makes sense later on, considering like Edwin had always kind of pushed her to be like, oh, like, we don't need you. If I turned out not to have any powers, you're going to have extra reason not to want me around. Yeah, I mean, that's always a kick in the teeth. Her powers up until this point were kind of a curse. She always felt like an outsider. She always felt like a weirdo, felt not normal. And now that she's comfortable with her powers, and she's like, oh, I can actually help people, and I'm doing a lot of good. I like my life the way it is now. You know, now it's like, of course, that's going to be when you lose your abilities of your own. It's a situation of your own making, but still. But yeah, like I said, my point being like, Edwin, Crystal was worried like he would see me as not useful and basically put me on the bench, because at least the other two are like detectives, and Crystal has kind of taken part, but like Edwin still doesn't recognize her as a detective. Not in the same way he's kind of recognized Nico's investigative skills and whatnot, but so she keeps Mom like hush, which is the worst timing all around, because Monty comes with them for a case of, hey, my ghost friend Gladys is missing. Problem is, obviously, it's a lie created to draw them in by a trap that Esther's setting up. And it seemed like Monty was kind of okay with it because, well, after last episode, Edwin kind of broke his heart last episode, so he kind of wanted to get even with Edwin a little bit. He didn't know what the end result was going to be, but to be fair, you didn't bother asking. You didn't think like, right, Esther can be very vengeful. You thought she was just going to be like oh, I tricked you, blah. Like, what did you think the end result was going to be? Like, oh, she's not going to try and kill them? Like, she's very vengeful, but the reason why I thought like the timing was terrible is they have a list of jobs they're trying to do, potential clients, but they needed Crystal's help. It's like, right, your powers can help out more in this case. So she ended up wanting to work Monty's case because it's like, well, that has less need of my power, so we should go for that. Charles is the one like, maybe we shouldn't take this job. Looking for a ghost seems on a lower priority. But then you have Edwin who wants to take your job because it's like, well, I kind of owe it to Monty. I want to make it up to him. I kind of like stepped on his heart a little bit last episode with my clarification after he kissed me and opened up his heart to be like, oh yeah, I like you too. And it's like, I wasn't talking about you. So because of that, like Edwin and Crystal weren't being the most logical of the situation. Their respective circumstances were dictating the moves they were making, and neither one of them really opened up to the others to tell them what was going on. And that lack of clarity and that lack of honesty kind of put them in a bad situation. I mean, you know, Edwin's emotional situation with Monty is one thing, but once again, Crystal straight up lying about her powers is another thing entirely. So, but basically they get drawn out into the woods, and it turns out that they are crossing paths with a being known as an elemental, which also we found out they're an animal ghost. And it's like, yeah, they're extra sad because they wander around not even realizing that they're dead. It probably takes a human a little while, but it probably takes even longer for an animal to figure out they're dead if they even do at all. Like, we didn't really get too much into that, but it was like, oh, that's really sad. From the far distance, I was like, oh, we're going to get a little Princess Mononoke-ish a little bit, you know, with the spirits and the gods and the demons, but it's like, no. We just got to see like a ghost deer getting like devoured by an elemental because they feed off of ghosts. They brought it up a couple times of like, yeah, ghosts can get got. They can be like dead because ghosts are just energy and these things absorb them and they disappear into darkness. So that's the closest thing you can get to death, and that pretty much is death, just eternal darkness locked in. And it's like, that's depressing and heartbreaking, and that's what befalls any ghost that falls victim to the elemental. They came up with a concoction to defeat it, but this thing is too big, and it's like, right, we got to find the heart of it. If we do that, this might be dealt with. But you also saw the shock in, like I brought up earlier with Monty, that he didn't recognize what was going to happen. He didn't realize Esther was going to kill them, so he was starting to feel a little guilty, but it isn't till later on that it really, like, until him and Edwin actually spoke, because despite him finding out earlier in the episode, like at a point in the episode, he still went along with the trap. He didn't say anything earlier, despite his reservations, because he was letting his emotions of like, yes, Edwin hurt me, but does he deserve to die? It's like, you knew dealing with this thing, they would eventually potentially die. You still went along with the plan regardless. It's not until Edwin opened up to him, it's like, right, you are my friend, I do care about you. It's just like, yes, I have my issues to figure out, but, you know, I do care for you. You are a friend to me, you know? And it's like, I've got a lot of stuff I've got to, you know, figure out, and that's kind of not on you, and I'm sorry I hurt you. Because obviously we had the group splitting up the respective pairings of Edwin and Monty figuring their stuff out, as well as Crystal and Charles. Because Charles was kind of like, right, moment it came out, Crystal ended up telling them like, okay, like she couldn't keep it secret forever because it's like, yeah, we kind of need your powers. Wait, your eyes didn't turn white. Well, maybe you just missed it. Wait, what's going on here? You're obviously lying to us. It's like, okay, I don't have my powers. It's like, Charles is like, right, I get your reservation to tell Edwin. I think he probably would have responded the way you did. You think he would have, leaving you behind, but it's still a thing of you should have told him. At the very least, you should have told me, like, why couldn't you trust me along with it? But it's like, her desperation to get rid of David led to all of this, and it's just, I think she didn't want to kind of conflate things even more than they already complicatedly are with Charles. And I think it was just almost like, I think maybe there was some fear of like, I didn't want to have to like come to you with this and like feel like even more of a burden, because I knew you tried to help me, but there's not much you can really do. I think it's interesting too when Charles was like, yeah, but I know a thing or two about hauntings, and I was like, I don't know how to interpret that. Like, that could just be like because of the Dead Boy Detectives, like, we're used to hauntings, that's kind of not new territory for us. Or could that have been like even more metaphorical, not in the literal sense, but more in the metaphorical sense, because of stuff with his dad and more stuff recently being haunted by stuff. You know, maybe that's what he meant. Then there was the David scene, which you would have thought, because David's only interest in Crystal was her power, but you'd think like now that her power is gone, you'd have no reason to come after her, but he's doing everything he can to taunt her. Once again, he needs something, because I'm like, if it was just about her body and power, like, why? Like, I'm sure there's plenty other mediums you can find, but why is Crystal such a good fit? Maybe it's because, as we find out, there's more to her powers, but we'll get to that later on. Maybe that's what he sensed, and he didn't want to ever tell her the truth of what. Because he's like, yeah, he said she was special, but he never got specific about it, because if he ever did, it's like, if she ever really knew herself, if she ever really knew her, what she's capable of, who she really is, then she could probably put too much of a fight against me, and I won't have the control I think I will. I think I do. But I love what Charles ended up doing. Pulled out the magic cricket bat and used it. I was like, oh, that's actually pretty dope that it's like a freaking boomerang, the way it like smashed through all the mirrors and then came back to him. I thought it was really interesting that, like I brought up before, it took Monty too long to have his change of heart, but by the time it happens, the Cat King shows up and he was like, yeah, let me spill the beans about all of this and like who Monty is and who he works for. And I was like, interesting. Because I talked about it previously, like it does seem like there's something between Esther and the Cat King. To what extent, I don't know. But we know that the Cat King has been keeping an eye on Edwin, which Esther kind of already knows that because she shooed away the 2 cats that he had following Edwin. He shooed them away, and it's like, well, if there's any cats watching, like, I don't know, she just thought they were random stray cats and didn't think much of it. But it's like, right, they're his eyes and ears around town. So I don't know if Esther just didn't think about that, like that he'd get in the way, or maybe she thought, like, who cares? Like, maybe she was completely unaware how obsessed and into Edwin that the Cat King was. Which, yeah, he showed up and helped and revealed everything, and, Monty ended up taking off. But the Cat King does not respond well to Edwin turning him down. Even though he's kind of got an inkling, just like Monty did, about the whole Charles thing, about how Edwin feels about him. But the Cat King, it's like, well, he's infatuated with Charles, and it's like, Edwin, he's like, aren't you going to give me thanks, a thank you? And he was kind of almost like, oh, the second kiss is the best, but ended up, Edwin turned him down, and he's like, hey, you don't get to just walk away from me. You do that, we're going to have a problem. Like, you don't just get to walk away from me. I've been playing nice so far, and if you don't do what I ask you to, you're never going to leave this town. And for Edwin, it's like, you are nothing to me. This is what you are. You're just a reminder of the thing that's kind of holding me back in this town. And it's like, well, we haven't gotten to it this episode, nor we will probably get to it next episode, but makes you wonder what that big bad trouble is going to come their way because of the Cat King. Which is going to be interesting too, because it might still play in the next episode because of Edwin's circumstances, but I'll get to that when we get to the end of the episode. But either way, we finally meet in its totality the creature. I think what's his name? Teethface, the giant mushroom ghost killing thing. Yeah. So Esther is trying to drag the boys and kill them. Crystal was kind of knocked out of commission by Esther, but then she recognizes the circumstances she's in. Oh, I skipped over it, but Monty's human body was ripped apart and he was turned back into a crow. You kind of felt bad for him because, like, is she about to kill him? I was like, no, she turned him back into a bird, but it's like, that's kind of sad too, because he will never be human again, because that's kind of kaput, especially because Esther's taken out of commission by the end of the episode. So not unless it's a thing later on that now that he was human, maybe he can speak human tongue now, so that if him and Edwin get the opportunity to talk later on, he's just going to be able to talk, or maybe Edwin's going to have some kind of thing that allows them to communicate. I don't know how that's going to work out. I mean, I don't know what that means for Monty post everything with Esther at the end of the episode, like I said, but we'll get to that in a second. But because she was remembering the washerwoman's prophecy or riddle, Crystal looked for the answers within herself. Like I said, the bird thing, I knew it had something to do with Monty, and lo and behold, it did. But she ended up in that spot where David typically ends up taking her with the 3 eyes, which, sitting here thinking about it, 3 single eyes, I'm like, that's not anything with the Sisters of Fate, is it? Considering, like, they do exist in this universe, and in this continuity, in Sandman continuity, so maybe it's not that. But I was wondering at the time, I was like, isn't that the place where David takes her? So I thought that was like a realm David controls, but maybe it's like that's a place that exists inside of herself, and then she goes even deeper and meets some of her ancestors, and kind of they explain, like, right, we're the women in your family. What you have isn't just being a psychic. It goes beyond that. Like, this tree is what represents you. Like, obviously, our history, your past, like, none of that can be taken away from you because we are all here. Like, what power you tap into, you channel it through all your ancestors, type of thing. Obviously, it's a concept and thing that even Crystal doesn't have a full grasp on the situation. And she has, despite her very unique circumstances of Demon ex-boyfriend, having her memories stolen, her friend's about to be eaten by, like, a ghost-killing mushroom, she's got the words of wisdom that she needed to just kind of tap into the power, and, like, nothing can take it from her because the power is within herself. And she comes back, and her and Esther duke it out. Like, her, like, punching and kicking Esther was pretty badass. But then she channels her powers and talks to Teethface and just told him to bounce, and he was like, Oh, okay, yeah, sorry about that. And as he returns to Earth, he ends up dragging Esther with him. Granted, she's immortal, so she's not dead, so we haven't seen the last of her. She's going to rear her ugly head, but that's what I was bringing up earlier, too. What does that mean for Monty as a familiar? Like, I mean, he wasn't around when she got dragged, so he's probably out and about. Like I said, it'd be interesting if there'd be some like correlation or connection to Matthew. I couldn't remember his name at the time when I brought it up because when Monty was first introduced, I was like, oh, it made me think of Matthew. Because all I could remember by the character's name, it was like, I couldn't remember his name at the time, but I was like, oh yeah, he's the crow that's voiced by Patton Oswalt in The Sandman. But that was the crow's name, Matthew. So I was curious of like, will there be some correlation or connection there? Probably not, just because he's a familiar, but once again, what that story looks like, how that plays out, what any future communication between Monty and Edwin looks like, we'll have to see. Wait and see. Either way, with that, there's also the other storyline, which I wasn't expecting to pop up this episode, and that's the whole situation with the night nurse. That was an interesting development. She's inside of the well with Kashi, which that definitely gave Monstro, Geppetto and Pinocchio vibes, which I thought was so interesting. He's been in there, like, he's an enigma because he's like, yeah, I've been alive for a very, very long time. And she tries to use her power, but she's like, why don't you have any trauma? He's like, I don't know, because I don't have any. Like, despite living a long time, there's been good in my life, there's been bad. But it's like, I guess he's so okay with everything in his life, the good and the bad, that he's so, like, not drowning, like, that trauma and pain. Like, it's like, yeah, bad stuff has happened. Like, things haven't always been great, but I don't let it haunt me. Which I'm like, the guy's an interesting person, especially because he kind of gave the night nurse some different perspective on things, because she was coming at it from the perspective of, right, I got to get out of here. She also brought up the point, and that was kind of a big question I had, of because she's technically immortal herself, like, she is a trans-dimensional being, she can't just die. So, like, yeah, she's here on Earth through special circumstances, but so it's not even like she could die to get back to the lost and found in the afterlife, Because obviously it becomes a conversation, kind of conundrum of, well, what the afterlife is all about. It's like, well, you've seen the afterlife, so you know what it's like. It's like, no, the afterlife is different for every soul. It's specified to each soul. So he's like, right. So you can't tell these boys that whatever's happening next for them in the afterlife is going to be better. But she's like, this is just how the universe works. All I do is follow the rules of what's kind of been set forth. And she's like, don't bring up the whole free will thing. Or she's like, I will drown you, or I will drown myself, because I need to get the hell out of this giant fish. But she was so desperate, and she wasn't listening, because she's like, I got to do my job, because I can't really die. I'm going to be here for eons and eternity being inside this thing. We also don't know how long Angie lives, so. But it actually took her, like, taking a stop and step back and listen to Kashi, because she's like, I don't need anything from you. And he kind of has these rings on. She's like, where'd you get those from? He's like, yeah, I lived a long time, and each one is a reminder of an adventure I've had. So he's like, right, why don't we ask Angie to spit you out, and then go back to sleep, which he proceeds to do, and she just casually goes along with what he wants. It's like, how did you manage that? And he also gives her one of the rings, saying like, right, take this. It'll be a reminder of our adventure together. Despite how small it still was something, which I think kind of means something in the long run in a lot of ways for the night nurse who's only had her job. That's probably been her, like, who knows, like, if she existed prior to being the night nurse. Like, did she have a regular life? Probably not. Like, my thinking is she's always been the night nurse. That's what she was created for. She was nothing before that, and for her, it's like, this is what I always will be. So she eventually catches up with Charles and Edwin, who were in the process of their talk, because Edwin still couldn't bring himself to tell Charles the truth, because Charles is like, oh, why didn't you tell me that you were, like, sweet on Edwin, why didn't you tell me that you were sweet on Monty? But he's like, no, it's not Monty. He's like, is the Cat King flirting with you? Is that why you've been weird? Because if he tries to make any moves on you, I'll bust him up and, like, knock off his whiskers. Because it took a lot for Edwin. He's trying to muster up the courage to say something, but before he can, lo and behold, the night nurse shows up to take them away, which Charles is like, right, Edwin was only there for a clerical area, which he had brought that up before, but then later on they were like, oh, no, it made it seem like he was supposed to be there. Because that's what I'm like, how do we get the clerical era angle of it? Like, that's what I didn't understand. I was like, what's the clerical angle of it? I was like, did he escape from hell? Because that's the thing of, like, if he escaped from hell and he's not supposed to be there, why is it that, like... Because that's the thing later on when the night nurse actually looks at the list, his situation's scuffed because it's saying like, oh, he should be in hell, but also says like he should be somewhere else. And it's flicking back and forth between the two options. And it's like, for her, she's like, in the millennia I've been doing this, that's never happened before. So it's like, what's up with his case? Because even Edwin was like, yo, even the demon that like took me to hell, even he apologized saying like, hey, I'm sorry about this, but it was a ritual sacrifice, so you got to go. So it was like, why did it take so long for that to get cleared up? But did it not get cleared up? How did he get out of hell then? That's what's not making sense. Like, that seems like that was kind of done on purpose, even though like Edwin himself said like, yeah, the kids that sacrificed me had no idea what they were doing. So... But, like, all of a sudden, like, I guess because he was partially registered in the list to go to hell, that spider shows up and drags him to hell. That spider actually reminds me of, like, I want to say it's the first boss in Devil May Cry. There's a lava spider, which is, I guess, isn't that the first? I haven't played the OG Devil May Cry in, like, so damn long. I don't remember. I want to say it was like the first big boss, but maybe there was another one before and I just don't remember. But yeah, like it kind of reminded me of that lava spider a little bit, the way it looked. And the fact is it just picked up Edwin and dragged him to hell. Which also interesting, and this kind of goes back to my point about the Cat King. The fact is it overpowered, despite how powerful the Cat King is, even with all that, it still couldn't stop Edwin from getting dragged to hell. Because you see at the end the bracelet falls off. Not unless the Cat King did at the last second, being like, oh, they're coming to get you. Like, maybe that's also like, maybe that was keeping... Because the night nurse was like, right, you two can stay together, but you'll end up going to the Lost and Found temporarily until we can sort out this whole thing. But that's when the spider showed up. So she wasn't going to do anything. So part of me wonders, is the reason why the thing found them because of the night nurse? Or did the Cat King, like, do that just to kind of punish Edwin, and he made it so like, oh, like I'm gonna make it so that they can find you and drag you away, kids, because once again that bracelet's not supposed to be able to come off. That would have kept him from leaving, and so for it to pop off either means hell is able to supersede everything related to the Cat King, or he did that on purpose. But that's the thing of probably Charles is gonna have to go to him for a favor next episode to get Edwin back, and it's gonna be probably like a deal with the devil type of thing of, despite liking Edwin, he's pissed at Edwin right now, so he might not want to help. Once again, if he had no part to play in what went down. Or, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Only 2 episodes left in the season, so maybe we're also going to get our peek into... Well, we've seen hell, but we've only seen some of hell in the Sandman. So, specifically, the department or section that Charles was in and what happened when he got dragged there, like what other, kind of give us a better peek into hell. I wonder if we're going to see any familiar faces. But yeah, that's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good